In this video, I'm going to be talking about increasing, decreasing, and constant functions. First of all, increasing functions. A function is increasing if its graph rises looking from left to right. This means that the y values increase as you move along the graph from left to right. Next, decreasing functions. A function is decreasing if its graph falls, again looking from left to right. This means that the y values decrease as you move along the graph from left to right. And finally, constant functions. A function is constant if the graph is horizontal. In this case, the y values do not change as you move along the graph in either direction. One important thing to remember is that we must read the graph in the correct direction. We need to read the graph moving across the graph from left to right. Another thing to note is the intervals used to describe when a function is increasing, decreasing, or constant are open x intervals over which this occurs. So I need to be looking at only the x values of the points involved. So let's look at a couple of examples. Here's our first example, and remember we always read a graph going from left to right. So as I come in from the left, in this section of the graph, it is falling and the y values are getting smaller, so it is decreasing until it reaches this point here, and then it starts rising and the y values start increasing, so this section is increasing. Now remember, when we describe the intervals, we have to use open x intervals. And please pay attention to the ends of the graph, whether it has points or arrows. So this graph is increasing in this region, and the arrow indicates it's going to keep doing the exact same behavior. So it's going to start increasing here, and what is its x value? 1. Open intervals, so use parentheses. And when does this graph stop increasing? Notice because of the arrow, it's going to have the same behavior all the way out until x is positive infinity. Now let's look at decreasing. Where does it start decreasing? It has the same behavior in this whole section, so it's going to start decreasing out here when x is negative infinity. It's going to continue decreasing until this point where x is 1. Is this graph ever constant? No. Now, let's look at our second example. In this region, the y values stay the same, so the graph is constant. Now, remember we read from left to right, so in this region the graph is going up, y values are increasing, so the graph is increasing. In this section, y values are decreasing. So when is this graph increasing? In this section here, remember we take x values, so it starts increasing at -2. Open intervals, so use parentheses. It stops increasing right here when x is 1. Now the graph is decreasing here, so it's going to start decreasing when x is 1. And it's going to keep decreasing from this whole section. Notice the arrow here. But we want the x value. This is pointing to x equals positive infinity. I know it's tempting to put negative infinity, but that's the y direction. We want as x goes out to positive infinity. And lastly, it's constant in this direction because of this arrow. It starts being constant at negative infinity. It goes all the way to this point when x equals -3. Moving on to our next examples. The graph is going up in this section. It's increasing. It's flat, horizontal here, constant. Going down here, it is decreasing. So the graph is increasing. Where does it start increasing? All the way down when x is negative infinity until it comes into this point when x is -1. It is decreasing in this section when x goes from 2 to, notice it stops here at a point, so it stops when x equals 5. And it's constant in this section when x starts at -1 and goes to x equals 2 at this point here. The last graph here, what is the graph doing in this section? Notice it's going up, the y values are increasing, so it's increasing in this whole section. It is never decreasing, it is never constant. And when is it increasing? Starting at this point. Even though there's a point here with a solid dot, we're going to use open intervals. So it starts increasing at -4, and it will continue increasing all the way until infinity.